Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Cass County Board of Commissioners. Let's start off the meeting tonight with one silent prayer. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up this evening, do we have any public comments? Move on to recognitions. Commissioner, have anyone that'd like to recognize this evening? Being none, we can move on to the approval of the agenda. Concerns or questions? Second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Agenda is approved. Move on to the consent agenda. And they consist of the April 17th regular meeting minutes and 21st budget work session minutes. Any questions or concerns on those? Do I have a motion to approve those? So moved. Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? They are approved. We'll move on to item number 7. Next up is the discussion item of the monument. Mr. Brian Miller.
Commissioners, Commissioner Jeffries had requested that we have this on the agenda. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Jeffries.
Thank you. Glad to put me on the agenda. This is about the monument. Don't get me wrong. All members on this phone, when we voted about talking about basic monument. A couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was voted 7-0 to statute. Later on, 2 or 3 years later, maybe a year or so, it was voted 5-2 not to move the statute. Okay, but I think my concern is now, we was told that we could move the statute, on county property. Last meeting, we heard that you couldn't move the county property. Not to move the statute. My thing is now, why didn't we know this before? Now we couldn't move the statute. Got a problem. I mean, it's told to try to move.
So Commissioners, what I'll tell you is you all have a sheet at your place that addresses the protection of monuments, memorials, and other artwork. There are reasonable ways for the county to be able to relocate the monument onto county property. If it's going to be moved, it has to be moved to county property. I think if you read through the protection of monuments, memorials, and artwork, this is the state statute that deals with that. I think what you'll find is there are a few methods that you can use to relocate, not remove completely, but relocate a monument or an object of remembrance. So having said that, those are very specific ways. And you're right, Commissioner Jeffries, we went through this a year, 2 years ago. Brian, do you have anything to add?
What I'd like to add is that in 2015, the legislature adopted the statute, which I believe is in front of you tonight. That's General Statute 100-2.1. And it clearly states that an object of remembrance, such as a Confederate monument and many other objects of remembrance that the county may have, an object of remembrance located on public property may not be permanently removed and may only be relocated, whether temporary or permanently, under the circumstances listed in the statute. And I believe what Mr. Jeffries is referring to is a few years ago, the board considered a renovation project of the courthouse square that perhaps would have resulted in the movement of all of the monuments in the square to an alternative location. And the statute does have a few exceptions for relocating temporarily or permanently objects of remembrance. One of those exceptions is when necessary, when the removal or relocation is necessary for construction, renovation, or reconfiguration of buildings, open spaces, parking, or transportation projects. So I believe what Mr. Jeffries is recalling is the prior effort to redesign the courthouse square, which would have resulted in the relocation of all the monuments that are there now. That is different, of course, than removal of the permanent removal of the statute, which is not permitted under the monument law.
So I have to make sure we can move the statue on the statue off the square.
If there is a construction, renovation, or reconfiguration of buildings, open spaces, or parking, it's possible to relocate. However, the relocation is subject to certain requirements, including moving the statue to a place of similar prominence in the county.
But it has to be construction in order to move it.
That is one of the exceptions that is contained within the statute.
You know, similar prominence is kind of a vague statement. I mean, it's right from the courthouse. I mean, anyone could argue that, couldn't it?
Yes, that there unfortunately is no additional guidance provided in the statute about what a place of similar prominence may be, although there is some qualifying language around that that talks about you know, similar access and places you can't put it, like cemeteries, unless it was the monument was in a cemetery beforehand. Yes, it's subject to some interpretation about what would be a site of similar prominence.
So we cannot, this board cannot vote to move them just for the sake of moving them, correct?
There are very few exceptions for relocation, right? And I've mentioned those to you. There is no provision in the statute that allows for the permanent removal at all. And then the relocation is limited by the available exceptions.
And if I remember correctly, the lawsuit said permanently removed.
Yeah, the threatened lawsuit speaks, the request is to remove.
Mr. Farrell. Question on the lawsuit end. The focus seems to be on the Confederate statute, but there are 4 statutes. If I'm correct, it's World War I, World War II, and the only monument to an African-American educator in El Dillard that's in this county. If those monuments are all removed, you've got 4 different groups that will possibly sue us over the movement if they're put in a less prominent area.
Well, all of the monuments that you have mentioned, assuming they are, you know, all owned by the county, and I'd have to go back and look at For instance, the Dillard Monument, I know there was a fundraising effort for that. I believe that was the most recent monument located in the square. But they presumably all subject to the same protections of GS 100-2.1. So, you know, in the country and in North Carolina, and, you know, there's been lots of focus on the Confederate monuments, but the protection of monuments law that's in front of you is much more generally applicable and would likely apply, you're correct, to those other monuments as well, should they be, you know, removed or relocated. They would enjoy the same protection under the statute.
One more question. In your professional legal opinion, discussion of removing those monuments at this point in time with a threat lawsuit against us over it, and one that is proceeding already against Alamance County that is a year in, if I understood what you said when we spoke about this last time, all that in play, isn't it a tactical move best served on the part of the county to uphold and, you know, just keep what we've got right now rather than wade over the middle of it and open ourselves up to something unnecessary?
Yeah, I don't want to give, you know, particular advice for any threat lawsuit, but what I will say is there are pending lawsuits in North Carolina, both to force the removal of Confederate monuments and also to prevent the removal of Confederate monuments by local governments. So anyway, the board steps at this point, I think it's safe to say that there's some exposure to claims, whether you move them or whether you don't. I would say that I would look forward to the day when there's some more settled law on the topic to provide some additional guidance to the board. But I do think that, you know, a decision to either remove, relocate, or not is all, you know, ripe for litigation in this current environment. And there will be some case law. I'm confident cases are moving through the appellate courts now, but we just don't have those appellate decisions to provide clear guidance on the scope of the law. So certainly, I think waiting for some clarity from the appellate courts is a good path.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the other side of the lawsuit equation and clarified that a little bit, because in full disclosure, I was contacted by a group that fights against those monuments being removed, and they threatened a lawsuit if it is moved. So it's darn if you do and darn if you don't.
You're exactly right. And what I would say is we have to follow the law in the county, and we're only given the authority that the General Assembly provides. And the Protection of Monuments Statute 100-2.1 is pretty clear that an object of remembrance located on public property may not be permanently removed. And it can only be relocated under certain circumstances. And you know, I think that the county is bound by that. And I believe that's what the law currently states. And until we have additional guidance, that law controls as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Well, one more question. What I'm saying is, I think if we could make a motion, we'll know where we stand, but you need to work it on it or not. That's what I'm trying to get. You know, we can make a motion to remove the statute, all statute on the square. And then we'll know, you know, continue to work on it or not. We said no, then you don't work no more, you know, for that consequence topic. You know, I spend more.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I think if the county wanted to look again at renovating the courthouse square and all that would be entailed in that and relocating the monuments, the board could make that decision that it wants to explore that option. If I followed your question, I think the board could decide to do that, subject to, you know, of course, the limitations that we've discussed. I don't think a motion is required at this point if you were going to maintain the status quo. If that was a part of what you were saying, Commissioner Jeffries.
There has not been a lawsuit filed, right?
No, there has not, to my knowledge.
What's determined right now, but I'm gonna do, I'll make a motion, move all of it. All the statutes are square. Those square can be redesigned by the second.
There is a motion on the floor to remove all the statutes. Is there a second? You have no second.
Can I ask a question? Mr. Miller, what was the purpose of the redesign? That the board approved it a few years ago.
Purpose of the redesign was to remove all of the monuments off the plan.
That was how you were going to enable it to be, okay?
That was our attempt at meeting the requirements set forth in the statute.
And Mr. Manager, may I add, I remember as part of that discussion, the part of that project was to open that space for other uses, right? I believe it was going to be a sort of a micro park or a public space to be used by residents. So there was some, there was some thought, I believe, and some dialogue around the use of the square, in addition to just moving the monuments, if my recollection is correct.
That's correct.
Yes. Any other comments, questions? Is none, we'll move on to number 8 on the great grant. Brian Miller.
Commissioners, in your agenda packet, you have the agreement for the great grant. The county's contribution to the great grant is $250,000 to be applied at the end of the, up to $250,000 to be applied at the end of the great grant after all building requirements have been met. And reported to the state, and the state has confirmed that they've been met. The build out period is a 2-year window. Zytel has 2 years to build out the infrastructure that they promised to build out. Any changes within the scope of the project could reduce the funding amount that we fund. We are using ARPA dollars ARPA revenue replacement dollars to fund that project. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the great grant. We've spoken about this several times before. So it shouldn't be new to anyone.
Are there any questions or concerns by the commission? Do I have a motion to approve the great grant?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to number 9, live streaming special meetings. That's your note.
Commissioners, I was asked to add this to the agenda. So we added it to the agenda for the board to have a discussion about whether or not to live stream broadcast the budget meeting, special meeting held by the county.
Didn't we come to, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, didn't we come to a conclusion, 6 of us were here at the last budget meeting, that we were not going to use county resources to do that at this time? Being it's just a discussion.
We came to an agreement of that, and there have been issues raised by constituents, and it was put on the agenda to be discussed again tonight.
It was brought up by constituents.
Constituents, yes.
I mean,
I've had 3 calls.
You had 3. Anybody else had any? You had 2. So we had 5 out of 21,000 people. That's population in the county. Well,
Well, that's what we're here to do, discuss, Mike, I want to be put on it, so.
right. So we had 5 out of the county to do that. How many did we have at the last one we done?
At the last budget session, we had 8 people on, 7 of which were county department heads.
7 county departments. So we
Isn't that
only had
correct?
7 county employees.
7 county boards.
7 county employees, and we only had 1 citizen that was checking in.
That's correct. I mean,
Well, in defense of that, 2 of the people told me that they go back and look at it. It's not a live stream, so is that like a right with that? They're on there.
we do have numbers that, so we can tell how many people go back and look and how many views it gets before and after. The problematic piece with that is you can't tell how many repeat, like you can't tell, number one, I don't think who looked. So we don't want to get into that, but you can't tell how many repeat people you have looking at those. And when Carla looks at it, Carla may look at it between 6 and 10 times while developing the minutes. I usually look at the minutes or the meetings after they're finished. So just taking some general numbers and trying to analyze how many people viewed it afterwards. It looks that like we may have 15 to 20 views from county employees or residents after the fact. But we don't know how many of those are repeat views that watch it again and again and again. So I would say a good average would be 20 to 25 views, not people, but 20 to 25 views.
How much does it, or give me a ballpark figure about what it costs to do that?
You know, sometimes it's not really about the cost. Sometimes it's really more about the time. Right now, we're in the middle of open enrollment. We have a lot of things going on. And to pull administrative people that are handling open enrollment and it's more about the time. For us, it's more about the time than it is the dollars. The dollars are important too, but when you have people staying, working overtime, building content at time and a half, or maybe time for time, then there's not really a cost associated with it because it is comp time, but it is time off that they'll bill.
So is there a recorded version of these meetings? Or are they being recorded for folks that could go back and want to see them later?
They're not being recorded as if I'm sitting here taking a picture of the board and being recorded. We have the audio simply to help facilitate the minutes, putting the minutes together.
Can that be put on the website for people to access to hear it if they want to see it later, if they want to listen to it later?
I'm assuming you can. The visual is not going to be very good. It's
It won't be a visual, though. It will be the talking.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
If it's an audio recording, that's the thing.
yeah, we could do that.
Because I was under, I wasn't sure when it says being recorded, if you meant she's taking the minutes as a recording or if it's audio, so.
It is audio. So the audio recording, you can set it to where it will, and correct me anytime I'm wrong about it, but you can set it to where it will transcribe the minutes within reason. It misses things. It doesn't always understand the Southern vernacular. So we have to go back, Carla has to go back in and make changes to it and so on and so forth. But a lot of times it will transcribe the minutes. So that's kind of what we use the audio portion of the recordings for thus far.
Take it on the website and get listen to that.
They can, if you want us to publish that, absolutely.
That would, other than her time, that's all it costs, right?
Yeah, because at the last budget session, we did that. And y'all saw that Ashley was not here. I was able to do that from my device without having to continually monitor the device. So yeah, we can definitely.
I don't think the video is that important. If you can put the audio up, I think that would be a happy medium.
Sure.
Do you want the board have an issue with that?
We're doing audio anyway. I'm on that.
Motion, we do the audio and put it on the website. So
Motion in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Next we have county manager's updates.
Commissioners, I do have two updates for you. They're kind of tied in together, but I'm gonna treat them as two separate updates. One, y'all, everybody knows that we've had CPAs working and trying to get us to a point where we can finish the fiscal year 2021 audit. I'm happy to report to the board now that we have a trial balance, which will allow us to have our financial statements prepared and get the audit finished. So we're moving in a very, very positive direction with that. Having that, okay, so that's my first update. My second update is having that trial balance allowed us to do a little bit of additional analysis with the trial balance, revenues and expenditures. And what I'm also happy to report to the board is that based on that analysis, we are conservatively estimating that we will add to our fund balance for fiscal year 2021, $1 million or more. So those are my updates. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Do the commissioners have any questions?
Sound like somebody's doing a pretty good job. You ain't paying like $1 million+ dollars.
Thank you.
Questions? We'll move on to commissioner comments. Comments. No one else has any comments? I've got. Go ahead.
Yeah, on the budget things, I would like, if you could, for the next one, or pretty soon, the actual money spent in the last budget. Year to date, where we're at year to date.
Expenses and revenues year to date.
Yeah.
Yep.
The lapsed salaries, you've got a lot of unfilled positions. I'd like to know what lapsed salaries are, so we can look at that too.
Okay,
Give you that information.
we'll do.
Well, actually, my comments are in line with that. And in addition to that, I would like to know how long these different positions that have not been filled have went vacant in the county. I'd also like to know, when you're laying out the expenses year to year, what the budget was last year. I want to know what was actually spent by each department in the prior year, not just what they were budgeted for.
Okay.
And I also want to know, how much money have we spent as a county up to this point this year?
So year over year expenditure and revenues. Yep. Year to date. I'm sorry.
So any comments? There are comments? Move right along. Announcements and upcoming events. May 5th, 2023, Commissioner Budget Work Session will be 9 a.m. here at the Memorial Library. May 8th, 2023, Castle County Behavioral Health Walk-In Center Ribbon Cut. Ain't talked about ribbon cutting at 11 a.m. at 1150 Highway 86 North. Minnesota. That's by a partnership. May 12th, 2023, Commissioner Budget Work Session at 9 a.m. around Memorial Library. May 15th, 2023, Commissioner meeting, 6:30 p.m. at the Castle County School Board Administrative Building. Dinner will be served at 5:30 p.m. May 18th, 2023, 6 p.m. Town of Yanceyville will host a town meeting at the municipal building. May 19th, 2023, Commissioner Budget Work Session at 5:30 here at the library. And that is all of our announcements of upcoming events. There's no further business before this board. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. A second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed,